How's that? Excellent. Okay, good. Been involved in many successes and many failures in the independent political movement, and I am hoping to share some of those with you, and I very much value the work that the organizers of this conference are doing to put together some very, very significant conversations I think that we need to have. Glad to be here.
I'm Brana. I think you all heard me speak at the conference before. And so I was, of course, founder of Draft Bernie for a People's Party, organizer. Worked on Bernie's campaign, national political outreach coordinator, then went on to his legacy organization for the campaign, Our Revolution. And of all of those things that I've done, Draft Bernie for a People's Party, with all the folks in this room, has been my favorite. So, thank you all. And I'm excited to discuss the question of where we go from here, the progress we've made in the Convergence, and being able to come together as organizations without any kind of adherence to a particular brand that holds us back. And also discuss the question of how Bernie Sanders weighs into this as well. And so, I will hand it over to our next panelist, Joseph.
Thank you, Nick, and I appreciate your work. And I appreciate being here. What a great idea to converge, as the title suggests. My name is Peter Joseph. I am the founder of an organization called the Zeitgeist Movement, a 501c3 nonprofit that has chapters in 60 countries and has conducted over 1,000 public awareness events over the past 8 years. I'm also on the board of Project Peace on Earth, which is a multimedia and gestural expression, I guess you could say, that also does events all over the Middle East as of right now. And in effect, I'm an author and I'm a filmmaker, but my big thing is I'm a structuralist, which is a sociological view that we have to change the structures of society if we expect to change human culture. And the majority of my work and authorship and research is into that field. And again, I really appreciate being here.
My name is Charles Douglas, and I am the founder of the People's Party of North Carolina. And the reason that I am here today is to share with you a vision of how we gain real power, how we keep that power, and how we actually change this nation, not in 20 years, but in 5. I could go on, but I think I want to wait for my time and make sure I'm courteous on this panel. Thank you. As luck would have it, you're the first one to make your remarks. So.
Do I need to set a timer for him?
So let's see, how can I be concise about what I believe and what I think is the future for our nation? But first is I have to give you a little bit of experience about what I, myself, as an American, have experienced. So I'm a young, 28, or at least I hope I look young, 28-year-old black male living in America today. And what I have found as a young man is that when I went to college, I would see people graduate, and they would graduate with debt. They would graduate in a society that, while it always said that there's an American dream, it's always one in which you are asleep. You're never awake. And so I wondered to myself, maybe I can join the Democratic Party and find a way to help people as well as build a career and find a way to make money. None of these things panned out. If you're in this room, if you spent the money to be here, you already know there's a problem in society, you know all of the issues, and you're trying to figure out right now, what can I do realistically, practically, where I come from. And I'm here to tell you there's only one way to do that, and I call it the people's model. We cannot come into this room and say that we need a new party or a party that already exists if we do not directly address the fundamental question of what is democracy and what is citizenship. If you are to combine conservatives, libertarians, Democrats, you cannot approach the problem that they are the enemy. I say this a lot of times in my videos, that in a real democracy, there are no enemies, only worthy opponents. And if you do not take that philosophy into the streets of America, when you are fighting for environmental justice, when you are fighting for economic equality, you will close ears and you will put people on the defensive that could be your allies. If we are to change society, we must start with something I call radical empathy. And what is radical empathy? Radical empathy is not starting the conversation with I'm right, you're wrong, just listen. Radical empathy is saying that while you may say things that I disagree with, while you may say things that oppress me and those like me, I understand that first and foremost, in a democracy, you are an American. You are a citizen. And while you may be hurting, while you may be saying things that I do not appreciate, I know that you would not be saying them unless you were convinced you were absolutely committed to changing this nation. Now, we may have different ideas and we may have different ways of getting there. But if you will just calm down, if you will talk to me, if you will allow me to listen, I assure you, while we may not come to the same conclusion, we can at least come to some solution. And that's what this country needs, is a solution. Does it need to be progressive? Yes. Does it need to be something sweeping and bold, the likes of which people haven't seen before? Yes. But it's also got to be something that they can digest, that they can chew, that they don't hate you for being on a high horse when you speak about it. It's got to be something where you don't hope to convince somebody in a single day. We need to create a civic duty, a nature of citizenship that is about sustained dialogue, not easy wins. We need to create a political party that isn't just an organization that meets once a month, but 4 times a month. We need a political party that actually puts food in people's mouths. We need a political party that teaches you what is the power of a mayor and a city council. Most of the youth in this country, they go to one civics class, and it's boring, and it's by a teacher, as somebody was just telling me, that says that, all right, this is American democracy, you're a citizen, you have some kind of power, all right, go graduate. If we have a crisis in the country, then we must not just teach the youth, but ourselves and each other the power of a mayor and a city council. We must teach ourselves and each other, what is Medicare for all? To this day, I hate to say this being on this panel, but I'm actually not exactly sure everything there is to know about Medicare. So how can I go out and talk to a Republican and say, no, we need Medicare for all, but it's a system that helps people. If you're going to fight for these issues, we have to, in our local towns and our local counties, actually have the conversation of what it is we're talking about. As a Democrat for over a year now, well, longer than that, but before I actually got committed, I have never been to a meeting where somebody has sat down and said, all right, instead of just knocking on doors and making phone calls for this candidate or our party or this issue, let's actually sit down and make sure you discuss it. I'm not going to just tell it to you. I want you to discuss it with me. What is Medicare for all? How does free public college and tuition work? If you don't explain it to me, I can't fight for it. And if I can't fight for it, I'll never be able to convince the majority of America. So, to summarize, the reason I hope that I'm on this panel, and the reason I hope that you will listen to me, is that I am not here for a new political party that is just about policy. I am here for a new kind of citizen, a new kind of organization that isn't just about fighting in elections, but it's about fighting for each other.
That's a tough act to follow. I'm a big picture kind of guy, so if I was to impart anything to you guys today, it's that not only do we need to have progressive developments within the existing American democracy, as we call it, but we have to begin to question the structure of what we call democracy to begin with, and to question what influences are actually keeping things locked into this rigid system that has been pretty inflexible in terms of its special interest lobbying and the powers of business and finance that have dominated American politics for the past 20 years. And of course, America is not explicit in this. You see the same patterns across the world. There's a great book that was written a while ago called The Vulnerability Thesis, and it pointed out that having a two-party system is basically the perfect recipe for special interest control. It was written by some authors at Harvard. I definitely recommend it. And it's a pretty obvious observation, and they call it vulnerability because it's limiting, and you have, effectively just a small number of people that share similar values. But on the other side of that, as a criticism of the work and the idea, if you have a system that is fundamentally classist, that is fundamentally self-preserving for the power, elite, whatever they may be, usually in business and finance, as historically seen, what better way to keep citizens controlled in the limits of debate than having small numbers of parties? And you go back to the Federalist papers and James Madison, who talks very explicitly about special interests, and he calls the faction minority and the faction majority. And it's a very dubious kind of distinction he makes, because on one side of it he talks about how the Senate was to be created to preserve the opulence of the minority, while the impecunious masses or the poor masses are not to be given the option of having the power to change anything that surrounds the economic system that allows for the gross wealth that has been universally imbalanced since the dawn of this country, and not only in its economic premise, in fact that there were only 6% of the population that could vote in the very first election, but of course the application and preservation of slavery and all the other social injustices that we had since the dawn of this country. So Madison makes it explicit with this minority and majority factionism, he uses that word explicitly. And within it, he says, well, he's implying that you have a special interest. We have to stop the minority pressure on governance to limit democracy by special interest groups. But what he also implies is that the special interest groups can also be the poor. And it's a very unfortunate but very specific reality that the current process, the current structure, as I like to say, of democracy is really there to preserve power. And so it takes a much stronger, much larger worldview. And I'm afraid to say, and as complicated as it is to address, it takes an economic perspective, because in many ways our economy precedes our democratic and political institutions in its loyalties and in how it functions, to really understand what's going on and what kind of change is required. So I really appreciate, again, this diversity, but the answer to me isn't just in establishing new political parties in themselves, but a larger conversation that says, well, what are we doing? What are the structural pressures of our society that are limiting us and keeping the insanity in place? How did this strange orange-haired person make it to this position? Is it just a mass hypnosis and psychosis? No, there's something far stronger there that has been there ever since the beginning. And that's a conversation I hope that can be expanded upon. Thank you.
Those are two tough acts to follow. Two very eloquent and brilliant people. So I would say, as we think about that question, about what role electoral politics plays, one of the questions that I think we all confront now is kind of, where does change begin? What is the weak point? What is the weak link at which point? And it seems to me that to some degree, before we can establish different systems, before we can move into changing economic systems, social systems, it's essential that we actually focus on retaking political power. And that is a central theme of this conference, is that we cannot, of course, cede the realm of electoral politics, as has been done before in our history. For example, after the 60s, when many people kind of withdrew from those movements, saying, "Oh, it's very difficult, to try to change electoral politics, to try to retake power systems that exist, and therefore I'm going to kind of try to create an island unto my own and withdraw from society instead, and kind of leave those problems. I'm going to create my own oasis away from everything else." And I don't think that, and that I think is kind of a retreat from the possibilities that we have. And so I think as we gather here today, it shows that we have an incredible invigoration of energy towards actually retaking those systems of power that influence so many others. And I also do think, too, that those of us being here today have a special privilege. We have a privilege to be able to think about these things, and to be able to really be able to attach a voice to them. Just to sit up here. I think it takes a certain level of privilege that you're not thinking about your next meal. each of us are not thinking about that. And so I think that, as Chomsky points out, I think that your responsibility is a function of your privilege, your responsibility to others. And so I'm really glad to see everyone here committed to doing what we can to help those who are even less fortunate. And I'm really encouraged by the way that this weekend has gone, this conversation has gone. I'm going to hand it over to Jackie.
I wanted to start out talking a little bit about some fake news, if I might. I'm the kind of person, I like to wake up in the morning, have a cup of coffee, and read an actual newspaper. I'm from that generation. And so I did that this morning. And wow, I saw this article on the front page of the New York Times. I'm a New Yorker, so I like to read the New York Times if I can get it. And so on the front page, there's this article. It says, Trump's flair upends legacy of two-party rule. So I was very intrigued by this. I thought, oh, good PR work by the folks at Convergence. So I read the first couple paragraphs, and it begins by telling a story about how in the year 2000, Donald Trump was considering running for president of the United States. And he set out on a course to try to win the nomination of the National Reform Party. So it mentions this. And then it says, in the end, he dropped the campaign, and the Reform Party, the leftover construct from Ross Perot's two independent presidential candidacies during the 1990s. So, okay, so here comes the fake news part by the New York Times. Donald Trump was thrown off the ballot by a set of independent political forces who were operating inside the Reform Party at that time. I was one of them, and he didn't decide to leave the Reform Party. He was actually rendered non-viable in the Reform Party because his delegate slate was removed from the ballot. Now, yeah, you can talk about but I share that story with you, number one, because I always like to take a hit at the New York Times whenever I get the opportunity. But also, because I wanted to say some things to you about the Reform Party experience, which I was part of. Independent voting was founded in 1994 by myself and Dr. Lenore Fulani, who ran for president as an independent in 1988 and 1992. And we came into the Reform Party experience as a progressive force, but specifically to join forces with the base of the Perot Rebellion. And this was very controversial at the time. We were attacked for having done this. People said, oh, you're not really progressives if you're working with those people, and so on and so forth. And but we didn't pay attention to those attacks. We actually tried to grow and build off of them, and to challenge the notion that ideology was the defining feature of being an American, and in the hope that we could create some organization and activity and tactics that broke down those barriers. In the end, the Reform Party was destroyed, largely by pressure from external forces. But for a brief period, we found that you actually could bring Americans together across ideological, class, race, geographic, generational lines by focusing on the issue of process and power and being willing to back-burner a set of issues that were close to everyone's heart in favor of using process, structural reform, restoration of a true democratic process, to use those concerns, those values, if you will, to bring people together. And I continue to hold to the belief that that is an important tool that we have as progressives to build with. Something that I respect Bernie for. There's a lot that I disagree with Bernie about, and I understand and feel close to the disappointment that many people feel about his having closed the door here. I think it's good to have brought that issue out into the open. But something I respect him for is that he refused to allow Trump voters to be trashed. He spoke out forcefully on that issue, and he said, contrary to Madam Secretary, who we were all supposed to line up behind because she's a woman and she's a this, and it was her turn, and blah, blah, blah. I voted for this sister. What Bernie did say, people who are supporting Donald Trump are not deplorables. They're not all the names that you want to hurl at them. They're Americans who are hurting. They're hurting. We have to find a way to connect to them and to represent them and to build with them. I think that, just in closing, I think one of the things that's very confusing right now, I think it's particularly confusing for progressives, is that on the one hand, it appears as if the ideological lines are hardening, but at the same time, they're breaking down. You have Sanders voters who voted for Trump. In fact, I saw a study that just came out of UMass that suggests that it was those voters who delivered Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin to Trump. You have voters who voted for Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012, and they voted for Donald Trump in 2016. You have over 1 million African Americans who did not come out to vote on Election Day in 2016 because they would not cast a ballot for Hillary Clinton and for Clintonism, which had been so destructive to the African American community in so many ways. The categories, the boundaries, the definitions of ideology are breaking down. And I would appeal to you that in whatever you decide to do, whatever you create, whatever you form out of these meetings, that you take that deeply, deeply, deeply into account. The American people are saying we need to change the power structure in this country. We, I believe, as progressives, have a responsibility to give them and to create for them what they are asking for. Thank you.
So again, I want to thank, in particular, our very talented organizers of this conference. Big thank you to Nick Brana and to Araquel Bloss. I think this is a tribute to you to help us come together. And I think together we are. How about now?
There you go. Yeah.
So we are in this really important moment. It's a moment of just unprecedented crisis and unstoppable resistance. And how do those two forces play off against each other? And I think bringing us together is really important. I think there's so much possibility here. The incredible jujitsu going on here is amazing, and for this group to have moved almost overnight from, lead us burning to, okay, we're the ones we've been waiting for, and how do we do this together? There's clearly no better way to bring Bernie on board or anybody else on board than to start really winning some big elections, because most of the politicians are just not going to risk it. But then there's the whole phenomenon, the reality that almost half of American voters didn't vote in the last election, and in fact, the majority of those who voted for Donald Trump were actually voting against Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
So we have a really crazy, mixed up political system, which has been more hijacked than ever by big money and big media. We have a house of cards, which is really in the process of falling down. And as it falls down, we are facing incredible emergencies right now between what we're seeing today at Harvey, last week, and today is Irma. And by the way, it's also Bangladesh, 1/3 of which is underwater, and over 1,000 people killed in the flooding in South Asia, and the fires in the West. We have an outright climate emergency right now. We have the attack on DACA going on right now. We have a human rights emergency, which is not only in this country, but it reflects the human rights emergency going on all over the world. And we have Korea, which is which is really teetering on the brink of a nuclear conflagration right now. So I think so many of us, and that's just a symbol of what we have wrought with American military power. So we have essentially this global assault on people, planet, and peace. Or to put it another way, it's Martin Luther King's triple crisis, the triple threat of militarism, extreme materialism, and racism. It's this global state of emergency brought by really the neoliberal order represented by both political parties. We really need a revolution,
Yes.
And I think to come together, and I think there's enormous progress which is being made right here, right now. We'll talk about some of that as we get to the questions, but I briefly just wanted to say there are infinite possibilities for us to work together right now. We don't have to put aside what we've achieved. It takes a while to build trust, to build confidence, and to build infrastructure. And what we began to talk about last night, representing our various groups, was how we can just hit the ground running right now, how we can start working right now, not only on the immediate, urgent social issues, but also on the campaigns. And we don't have to wait for 2018. I want to show you real quick some of what's going on right now in 2017. Here's a candidate for mayor of New York, Akeem Browder, who is the brother of Khalil Browder, who was the survivor of a 3-year stint in prison, much of it in solitary confinement, for stealing a backpack which he did not steal. Or at least which, he wasn't even accused in court. This is a guy who then went on to commit suicide. So Akeem has founded a closed Rikers prison movement and has come into the Green Party as a political base for the social movements. And it's this unity of social movements with political vehicles that allow us to grab power. It's not one or the other, we gotta do both. So this is just an example, if we can get it back here. Hang on 1 minute. Okay. These are just some quick shots of Akeem, who's a really powerful and charismatic guy running a powerhouse campaign. Darlene Elias, a Latina running for city council in Holyoke, who got her start by saving her public housing project, which was basically targeted for demolition, and she organized. Jabari Brisport is a candidate for city council in New York City, who himself is a member of the DSA. And I think what's happening, the Greens have ballot access, we got a ballot line in a lot of states, and if we share an agenda, we've got the same agenda, we will work with candidates of all parties. Many of our candidates already belong to the parties. Howie Hawkins is another example. I don't know if people know Howie. He's been a candidate who is extremely competitive for mayor of Syracuse, New York right now. And this is Jabari. Seth Caperdale, who is running for governor along with Lisa Durbin, if I have her name right. Durden, that's right. Lisa Durden, who got thrown off of her mainstream public TV gig because she publicly supported a Black Lives Matter event, so she's now hit the ground running and is organizing full-time as the lieutenant governor candidate. Seth himself is an activist minister who has gotten very busy creating solutions. So he has just started lots of nonprofits to create affordable housing, particularly for veterans, for young people coming out of foster care, for abused women. He does sanctuary programs and has hosted many immigrants at risk for deportation. Has been a very powerful part of building the social movement. So this is just to let you know, we don't have to wait for 2018, and we don't have to wait until we have built a common unifying structure. Let's just hit the ground running. We got work to do. And as we do it, I think for us to piggyback on the work that each other have done, and for us to build a way to coordinate our efforts together is really powerful. We began discussing this last night. It piggybacks on the efforts of Left Elect, and I want to give a shout out to Left Elect, which has been working on this same process for the last couple of years. And last night I heard some really exciting discussion about how PIP can simply piggyback on Left Elect, and we can just go forward stronger together. We're unstoppable. Thank you.
Yes. It's not on.
Well, I don't want to.
Clearly.
My name is Araquel Bloss. I'm the founder of the Progressive Independent Party, which is a broad front movement. We began with our own petition we began with our own petition last March 2016 when Bernie had lost a Super Tuesday, and it shocked many of us. And I worried how we were as Berniecrats, how we were as the movement, the natural coalition, going to stay together if he did not win the primary. It was really hard to imagine at that time. So we put a petition out to Dr. Jill Stein, Senator Bernie Sanders, Shama Sawant, that wonderful socialist, and Democratic Socialists of America, Progressive Dems of America. And it got, so much attention because people really do want to unite that we just founded it. And people weren't ready to listen to this idea at first. And we've merged and I've learned, and I was co-founder of Occupy Inauguration, which built these relationships that you see now in this conference and on this stage. Because relationships and trust take a lot of work and a lot of effort. And so we had our first summit the day after the inauguration. And I'm a single mom. I'm just like you. I'm an average American that kind of wants to be taking pictures of my panelists right now. I'm honored to be here. When we had a summit, the Justice Party was my only sponsor, and I used my health savings account, so we tell the federal government, and we pulled it off. It was in a bar, and somehow we got Ralph Nader there, and Dr. Jill Stein, and it gives me the goosebumps still. But what that tells you is that we're all average Americans, and what we can do when we have hope and faith in the citizenry of this country, and we have good intentions and integrity, we can ask people to come with us. And in that process of being at that old bar with Ralph Nader, I'm not sure why he would do that. I stood up there and said, and I had tears in my eyes, I'm a single mom, I'm an accidental leader, I'm asking you for the American people, sharpen your pencils, come together, create a strategy to unify us. You are the leaders we've been waiting for. Do your jobs, please. Not like that, I didn't say that. Well, needless to say, it's a concept whose moment has come. When I talk about a broad front movement, coming together and unifying strategies for electoral power, people's faces light up. It's like, oh, yeah, we should work together. So this is why we're here today, and with all my colleagues here. The PID model is we have 4 pillars. One is coalition building. The second is independent media. So none of our social media sites allow the sharing of mass media, corporate media, which is giving us a corporate narrative. Secondly is building electoral power. And thirdly is movement building. Because let's be honest, we don't have time to do just one. We don't have time. And as an inverted totalitarian system, we may not even have the opportunity to build electoral power, let's be honest. Our votes do not count. Our civil rights, in the last 4 decades have decreased. Our voting rights, our civil rights, our right to privacy, it's diminished. I'm a regulator in my day job. And so I can tell you that the corporations by the politicians pass the laws that benefit the corporations, which deregulate, and the regulations are for the people. And as those systems are degraded, we don't have a judicial system that's checking the executive branch. We don't have a Congress that's working. Our government is not working. It will get worse. But I am here to say we have hope. We always have hope. But what we have to do is work together no matter what is to come. Whether we get electoral power or not, we must be ready. We must be ready to stand up together and take this country back for the 99%. And what I'm asking is broaden your hugs. Open your arms.
Thank you all. Some really heavy stuff. I appreciate all your comments. We're just going to ask a couple questions of the panelists that are prepared, and then again, we want to make sure we leave a good amount of time for audience participation. So we'd like to hear the comments of all the panelists for each of these questions. Let's keep the comments or the answers relatively short, 2 minutes or so, 2 to 3 minutes. The first question, Araquel made a really interesting point about not having time and having to do movement building as well as electoral, and I think this is a really interesting panel from that perspective because roughly half the panel is involved in electoral politics in some form, and then half the panel is less involved in electoral politics, and there have been comments about process and comments about changing the system and things like that. And so the general question is, what are the prospects? What can collaboration do to affect the 2018-2020 elections specifically? And I'm interested to hear that from an electoral perspective, but also the perspective of those of you who are not necessarily, again, focused on electoral politics. What does coalition building look like to you? What effect do you think it can have from the perspective of what you are doing? And why don't we start down with Eric, and we'll come back to this one.
Well, I'm happy to report we did have a meeting last night. Of course, we were meeting with many of these organizations, and we came out feeling very hopeful. So we changed a little bit of the questions today because we've moved beyond which party is it going to be. It's any party. It's whatever strategy. We are going to come up with an answer, and I'm proud to say I believe that all the organizations here and all the leaders that are here are moving forward in that discussion. We've had a huge impact in putting candidates up that we all support, that we all vet, that we all support. Because as a coalition, when you build consensus, you get closer to what the American people want. It takes longer to make sure you're inclusive, that you have diversity, but it's not tokenism. These things are important because these are our people we're representing. So I want to just mention that as we talk about new systems, that we need to fight the imperialism, the patriarchy, the colonization, how we are built. So whatever structure that comes out of this conference or in the future needs to be empathetic and have integrity and be creative and have ingenuity and hope and things we may not always talk about in structure building. But I think it's important that we not make the same mistakes and build the wrong systems again that can be corrupted, right, by money.
by power, by greed, by ego. We're done with that, right? It's almost ruined our world, our globe. So as we build, I ask you to continue to think of how we build and the voices we include. It's important, it takes longer, but it's valuable. We must do this together.
I think one of the benefits of working together in an ongoing way is that it allows us to build trust, it allows us to get to know what our different options are, and it allows us to decide whether or not a political party is going to be useful to us. And as a mother on fire who got my start decades ago, where did it begin? You know, actually it began way back during the Civil Rights Movement and the anti-Vietnam War movement. But I went from movement to movement. And then once I had my medical degree, then I was very involved in reforming the healthcare system and then working on the environment as a major driver of death, disease, and destruction. You know, I realized how powerful the system is, and I began to understand that a political party is essentially a coalition of activists which crosses issues, crosses generation, crosses race and class, and adheres over time. So political parties are actually not, in my view, what the Democrats and Republicans represent, which is essentially a corporate agenda which is bought by its biggest sponsors, by the predatory banks and the fossil fuel giants and the war profiteers. A real political party is a coalition. And there are powerful things about those coalitions. My view here is that we don't have to decide what our overarching political strategy is. I myself am a Green for very good reasons. I got tired of fighting one issue at a time and being divided and conquered, which is what they do to us absent an ongoing coalition. A coalition, by definition, becomes a political party when it actually has a clear agenda, a clear strategy forward, and it coheres over time. That's basically a political party. I look forward to making the case to people why I think the Green Party is the most effective structure for us to work forward with, but we don't have to have that conversation now. And as far as I'm concerned, you don't have to be a Green for us to work effectively together. We bring tools to the table, and we gotta hit the ground running if we're going to have a future, you know, to survive in whatsoever. And it's a very unifying moment, I think. You know, this is kind of the Hail Mary moment right now, and the clock is ticking. We gotta get to work, we gotta get to work together. We don't all have to be on the same page politically in order to do that work. And what we discussed last night was having some kind of a representative organization that meets, whether it's monthly or what, and decides on, you know, what the larger group is going to do, what candidates it's going to back, what movement campaigns it will participate in, and the groups can either participate or not, depending on, you know, whether they buy into it. But it's not rocket science, and this builds on the work that was being done by Left Elect, which has a lot of respect, and I think we just gotta keep moving and get it going. I said let's push downstream the questions about parties and what our labels are, that we don't need to agree about that in order to start working together.
Two thoughts on this question. The pollster Pat Cadell, who some of you may be familiar with, who's an acquaintance, had actually done some of the polling right before the election that was most predictive of what the actual outcome was. And Pat kind of had his pulse on a whole set of things that the entire, you know, media establishment, the punditry and so forth were missing. You see. But Pat did a survey post-election, and in which he asked a broad cross-section of Americans the following questions. Did they think that the new president, was out of touch with the American people? Did they think the Republican Party was out of touch with the American people? Did they think the Democratic Party was out of touch with the American people? And the results came back between 60 and 70% of respondents answered yes to all three of those questions. Now, one of the things that Pat concluded from that, which I think validates a lot of what those of us who are activists have been seeing and experiencing on the ground, is that there's an opening for what Pat called, and I happen to love this term, the politics of otherness. People actually weren't looking for a party. A lot of times, pollsters will ask people, do you support the idea of a third party? It comes in at, 55 to 65% yes. But it's kind of a placeholder issue, really. It's like the only way we know how to describe something other than what currently exists. I think this whole concept of the politics of otherness, and I wrote a paper recently called Finding Otherness, which is really maps out kind of a blueprint or a strategy for the 2020 presidential elections, which engages the issue of how to bring a broad cross-section of independent and anti-establishment forces together. I happen to think that the 2020 presidential election is a very unique opportunity to do that, and I think we have to start to have those conversations now. I think they're difficult conversations, I really do. But I think we have to have them. Because I think that I think that there is a possibility that we could create a process involving millions of Americans, out of which could come a unified independent presidential ticket that could compete for the White House in 2020.
One thing that comes to mind when we think about this, and the question that you posed, Brian, is this is really a global revolution at this point. Global revolution against decades of neoliberalism, spun out of control, inequality that is beyond levels seen in the Gilded Age, the age of robber barons when Standard Oil controlled 95% of the oil market. Inequality going back into medieval times. And so in this global revolution, I think, as we consider what is it that we should do and what can we do, we should look to our peers abroad and nations abroad and think, well, what is working over there? There are some countries which are actually more advanced in this process of dismantling what are the establishment parties in those countries. And we see actually that some patterns and some lessons beginning to emerge from that. For example, these movements to combine existing forces, as it is that we're doing here, both electorally, in terms of movements, a convergence that's taking place in other countries. For example, in Greece, where Syriza overthrew their version of the Democrats and Republicans. They overthrew their Socialist Party, replaced them. And also looking at Spain with Podemos, same story, where they have essentially broken down what was a two-party system ever since the country overthrew its monarchy and in 1975. And looking at other countries like Chile, Uruguay, same story. It's also a convergence of political forces, electoral movements that are combining in order to be able to put up a unified front against the establishment. That Frente Amplia in Chile is well on its way now to replacing their version of the Democrats. They are, yeah, that is worth clapping for. That's right. And so I think there are ample lessons out there to learn. You are not entirely in the wilderness here. There are models out there that are experiencing good success in Greece, Portugal, Spain, Chile, and those are things that we should look to as guides as we think about where it is we go from here.
Thank you, Nick. Those were excellent points. I always like to step back slightly and look at the groupistic identification problem when it comes to coalition building and association between parties, because how many times have you met people that, especially in the prior election, that identify with the symbol of their party after a certain point, as opposed to their platform. And you interview multiple people that claim they're part of this particular party perspective, and you give many different perspectives of what they define that party as and what their platform is. You can go back into things like social identity theory and other studies of the human mind, and realize that we gravitate towards group inclusion, and we do that on one level at our peril. But at another level, it allows us to see each other as ourselves, and the ultimate extreme would be the group inclusion of all of humanity as a single working entity. Sadly enough, we're still in many different fractions on this planet. And for better or for worse, I think political ideologies contribute to that by, again, its very structure. So at the end of the day, anyway, it's an issue of platform. We all have the same shared needs. We all want to see an increase in public health. We all want to see social stability, at least I think most people do. And with that, it brings the conversation to another level. What are the inputs that contribute to increased public health, increased social stability, increased sustainability with our habitat, of course, the system synergy of all of those forces, which brings my argument when it comes to platform, which is again why I think Bernie's symbology was so strong, is he did one really powerful thing, and that is remove the taboo of the word socialism, something that this country since the mid-20th century, since the battle of U.S. capitalist hegemony against the USSR, this has been something that our population and Western society at large has been so powerfully indoctrinated into. And what does it really say? It says, no, government can't possibly ever be good enough in its efficiency to work systemically to take care of its population. That's pretty much what the meaning is of a capitalist society, and that we must fragment down, and we have to have these independent groups fighting against each other, and we're going to call that freedom. And of course, as we see through time and the power of big business and money, that isn't freedom, because there's leverage in this system, and that leverage has been there for a long time. And a joke that I like to throw out there is that we look at our society, we look at the values, we look at the fact that everything is driven by money, the incentive and root dynamics of market and trade strategizing and dominance. Why are we not letting the Koch brothers run America? Because everything else in our society is incentivized by this process of buying and selling and owning and controlling. And who's to say? In fact, it's an anomaly to even consider. And I'm being very truthful, but also jokingly. The truthful that how can we even expect the political process to not be controlled by big business and money when everything else in our society is? So, and that leads me again from a structuralist perspective, and I'm not obviously opposed to any kind of political organization. Parties, obviously the groups have to unify and come together, but the question is, what's the platform? And my big thing, and I hope it sinks in, and again, it's why Sanders' symbology is so strong, and the work of Jill and so on, is that we have to remove the stigma that society just isn't able to work together in an organized capacity, economically specifically. And if we can get this platform across at the highest level of efficiency as a society that we could ever create, that will increase public health, reduce our ecological footprint, and increase social stability, stop war, intergroup conflict, and so on, is the harmonious bringing together of a new democratic economy, a new type of thinking that really will transcend the political arguments if we can achieve that.
Step one, we must come to the understanding that a national third party right now is not feasible. We don't have the time, we don't have the resources. We come from all across the country. If we're going to leave this conference and get something done, you need to go ahead and resolve yourself that a national third party is not our option right now. The best option for us is what PIP is doing. We need to find the most progressive party in each state. We need to figure out, is this a party that can appeal to the broad slice of America? Because we don't have a lot of time. We need to make gains, and we need to show that we're fed up with the status quo. We can only do that by winning local and state legislative seats, and we can only do that if we can focus on our own state. That's step one. Step two is when you leave the conference and go back to your towns and your cities and your counties, what I personally believe is that the electoral strategy is the same thing as your platform. When I say that we need to look for a new kind of citizen, I think everybody is looking for a new kind of citizen. None of you want to have fights with your friends over policies you believe will help everyone. No one of you wants to walk down the street and see
children walking out of decrepit schools and to see people hurting when we're the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. So the second step is you need to go back to your towns and your counties and you need to find a meeting space. It needs to reserve between 50 and 100 people, and what you need to first do is you need to conduct a county and city audit. So what I'm asking you is not to go out and say Medicare for all first, even though that's in your heart. What I'm asking you to do is to start knocking on doors, start making phone banks. I don't care if it's one person, I don't care if it's three. I want you to start calling people, and I want you to start asking in your local community, and I want you to go all the way up to state level. I don't want you to worry about national. National is too much for a lot of people to chew. So go home, start talking to your neighbors, and start asking them, what is most important to you? And you try to connect it back to Medicare for all, try to connect it back to the $15 living wage, try to connect it back to what is the majority of the people in your local community, what can they get behind? Because that's how we get a majority, and that's how we win mayor's races, and that's how we win state legislative seats. And that brings me to my third and final point. What we need is a third party in each state that is actually not focused on federal and state elections unless they're legislative. If you cannot win your state house and get a majority, then I don't believe we need to be tramping around our states talking about a national agenda. I know it's going to be harder. I know it's hard to focus on young people, and off-year elections are not our strong suit as progressives. But if we're going to change the world as we keep talking about, if we're going to solve these big problems, then tell me why you can't do it in your own community. And the only way I believe that you can do it fast and effective is if you start off with that principle that I'll always talk about, radical empathy. You've got to talk to people. You've got to start the conversation with, what's your name? Where are you from? Why do you believe that black people should be better as slaves? If that's the conversation that you need to have. I know it may sound a little ridiculous, but that's the only way they're willing to listen. If there's one thing I've learned about trying to convince people about common sense progressive policies, especially when they're coming at me with something that just makes zero sense, is if I start off with, what? What are you talking about? Are you kidding me? You don't see poverty? But if I start off with, okay, so you think we should have no minimum wage? Okay, so why do you think that? So you grew up in a farmhouse in this little town, and your dad told you there should be a minimum wage. Okay, that makes sense. But at the same time, don't you have some friends that work for minimum wage? How are they living on that? You see this tone that I'm using? It may seem like, oh, you're just being nice. But it's the most powerful tool I've ever come across. Well, that sounds like a good day.
Thank you all. We're going to open it up now to the audience because we're getting a little bit short on time. I think we started late, so we could probably go over a little bit. But we'd like to open it up to questions. Let's take a few at a time, and I'll call on you to stand up. Feel free. We're not going to have all the panelists answer every question. If you have a question that's directed at a particular panelist, feel free to indicate that. Otherwise, we'll just maybe see who wants to take a run at something. So let's start here. We'll take maybe 3 at a time, stack them up, have you ask them, and then we'll answer them, and then we'll move on to the next. So let's maybe start here, and then the woman behind, and then the lady here in the front, and then we'll move to the next.
Actually, mostly I'm going to be doing Clear the Record. Last night, Nick made some commentary about the current bill that Bernie is supposed to introduce on next Wednesday, I believe, the 13th. There have been a lot of movement since what he told us last night, and I wanted to clear the record on that. A lot of that movement came from 2 fronts. You people making phone calls when all of us who were the activists on the ground, going to meetings, sitting in with him, the HOPE people, the physicians for a national health program. We've multiply been sitting down and talking to his healthcare people. The iterations and changes over the last 6 months, from I'm not introducing anything to I'm going to introduce something disastrous and call it Medicare for All, has broadly changed. Recently we found out and heard something similar to what Nick had said, that there'd be a multi-tier system, that there'd still be insurance, there'll be co-pays, deductibles, all kinds of things. It made our heads explode. They've still not ever been able to show us a bill. We heard Cory Bicker's staff was helping write it. Kamala Harris is sitting on one hand. That made us crazy. So we wrote articles, and a letter went to the staff and to Bernie from PHMP and HOPE, indicating this was not acceptable. They didn't respond to a meeting, so we put it all over social media. And you guys responded in two ways. The Bernie cultists said, "Oh my God, how dare you?" And the rest of us, we said, "We're just asking you to call." And they have been extremely receptive. All of those calls that came in made them sit down again. Last Wednesday, in the middle of us sitting through the Health Senate meeting, that hearing was a disaster. But they met for hours on end, and the result of that was there is no multi-tiered system. We are much more in line with potentially a full Medicare for all, which will cover everyone in, nobody out. This is really important for people to know. The deductibles and copays are gone. They will be moving to only having potentially a copay for some pharmaceuticals that are non-generic to encourage generic use, with a waiver by doctors for those who need a non-generic if it's not available. The things that disturb us most is they're not covering long-term care. They're allowing independent, investor-owned facilities to potentially stay in play, and which we don't like, and a too slow transition time. With that being said, no bill has been seen, so we are not fully supporting anything until we see it. But we encourage everyone to continue to call, to continue to put it on social media, that we are glad about the big movement, and we expect more, and continue asking because their staff seems to be extremely receptive. And as we know, Martin Luther King said this is one of the greatest injustices in the world, is inequality in healthcare. So we believe it's the first big change we could make and move the whole empathetic conversation to another level. So I just wanted to clear that record because you know the
Thank you all. What I think I'm hearing from you in your conversation you had last night mirrors a lot of my conversations and thoughts from yesterday's panels and discussions. So I just wanted to clarify what I'm hearing. That we're not going to be afraid of the idea of multiple alternative parties. We're going to embrace the idea, and we're going to commit to working together in solidarity. I know this is not an easy thing. I think we have to learn together how to work together so that we can model that for other people as well.
Hi, my name is Sonny. I'm from Maine, Chase, and I can't sit still. I have ADD. I got elected the day after the general election, and I joined up with a group on Reddit called the American Progressive Party. We now are recognized by the FEC. We have 13 chairmen in states, and there are already 3 progressive parties. So, if you intend to take off, I'm going to be in the last session if anybody's interested in talking about this. And if you have to go drive back to New York or someplace else, come get the information and I'll give you our URL and anything else you want to talk about. Thanks.
Maybe, okay. I don't know if you want to take just 1 second to, the question was, to see if she heard that right about coalition building. I don't know if that was really a question there, but it sounded to me like that's exactly what we were talking about, and that the things you're saying are the things that we were talking about. Okay, let's take a few more. Here, and then here, and then to the gentleman in the yellow shirt.
All right, great talk, guys. My question is directed at Nick. You mentioned in the beginning that you don't think it's wise to retreat or withdraw or drop out from the political process and sort of the electoral process. I think that's an important thing to kind of consider and examine. I don't, from the way I see it, I don't think it's so much as a surrender as it is a recognition that we're dealing with a political structure that can no longer be trusted to represent our interests. It cannot facilitate the type of changes that need to occur. And, you know, at least not at the federal level. Like, you look at this election that we just experienced in 2016. Two of the most wildly unpopular candidates you can imagine. And this is what our democracy produces, our so-called democracy produces. It's an insult. It's an absolute clown show. So, you know, I think there's a good analogy. A guy by the name of Chris Ryan. He's an author. He's an author, psychologist. I know Peter knows him. He did a podcast with him recently. The way he puts this is that we're all on a bus right now. Say we're all on a school bus, right? And we're all kind of arguing and bickering with each other and tearing each other down over who gets to be the driver of the bus. But guess what? The big secret is that the bus is careening out of control. It's going over the guardrail, and it's, you know, about to hit a tree. And it doesn't matter who's driving the bus, because there are structural mechanisms in this economic paradigm that we're in right now, to where it really doesn't even matter. The bus is driving itself. And so I think it's important that we kind of step back and look at it from a broader view, that, you know, this economic paradigm that we're in right now, it appears not to be viable. So I was just wondering if you could speak to that.
Hey, yeah, let me just get right here. My name is Linda Thompson, and I was co-chair of the Connecticut Green Party, and I was also on the steering committee and one of the prime movers of the Left Elect organization, which has been trying to do exactly what we're talking about here today. And we're going to be broadening out to work with more forces that are fortunately now getting what we've been trying to do for a couple of years. We had a conference in Chicago, which was very successful. It was a little bit smaller, but just about as big as this event 2 years ago. And since that time, we had a number of very successful events at a Labor Notes Conference, the Left Forum, and so on, and had been discussing a conference, which I think would be the next step for this new group to take. I am here personally to learn from you. And as a Green Party member, I would like to hear more feedback on why you feel you need a new party. If the Green Party is not acceptable to all the people who are moving left and looking for an alternative, we need the feedback to understand why you don't feel we are the vehicle, okay? We want to hear that. We want you to know that you are welcome to come in and help us transform the Green Party into what we need. I want to say why I feel it has not been as successful as it could have been till now. It was formed in 30 and 40 years of neoliberal politics, where the movement was suffering defeat after defeat after defeat. We are not responsible for that. We have faced 30 years of being called spoilers, which any new party will be called as well. We have had our candidates smeared and maligned and ignored and blacked out, which, if you form a new party, you will find as well. So, saying all that, I am hearing some criticisms of branding, which is a problem. People see us as a narrow environmental group. They aren't aware that we're involved in the Black community, the immigration struggle, and all these different movements. And we are beginning to increase the consciousness that we are a multi-issue party, which did not exist before. Our problem is not that people have rejected us, it's that they've never heard of us. That's what kind of all over the time. You've never even heard of the Green Party, even though we're on the ballot, they haven't heard. So that's another problem. But all we can do, and it may be a new party that is formed. We don't reject that. No Green has ever rejected that. However, we're saying through to 2018 and 2020, there's not going to be another party except the Green Party. And we need help. We need support. The left stood on the side for the last 30 years and watched us struggle and criticized everything we did. And examine us like bugs, like you're not doing this right. You're not doing that. Like, okay, come on in and help us. Yes, and so I'm trying to say we're open to change. We're even open to changing the name of the party. But we need help. We need the support of the left instead of the criticisms, and you're not doing enough. Yes, we focused on electoral activity, but we want to do more mass work, and we are doing more mass work. And I'll just say at the last national meeting of the party, there's a whole new wave of Bernie people, youth coming in, people of color coming in, labor representatives coming in, that is transforming the party and moving out the dead wood and the old people that are in the way. So I just want to make you aware of this and invite you to help us.
Hello. I'd like to say, I think of George Washington's farewell address when he talked about factions, being aware of political parties. But at that point in American history, we had reached the predatory phase of human development. And today, I think we're witnessing a crisis, even deeper crisis, in terms of this country and the world, when we look at that predatory stage. And socialism is to advance us beyond that predatory stage. But I think that we need a political party in order to move to that point. And that's my take on it. And we have to find a way to find that. But wherever we go, it can't be fought on just on an intellectual level. It's got to be boots on the ground. I talked to a gentleman here I was very much impressed by what he was doing in Kentucky. And we need to do that type of thing all over the country. People need to, whatever we end up, however we coalesce, we need to get out there and work with people like labor unions do. You know, we need to walk with them, see what's going on in their communities and neighborhood, and we need to get that base. Because although I know statistics say that people are ready for that change, but it's not automatically ours until we go and work with them. We have to go out and work with them. And I do have a question, no more talking of me. But I want to ask the gentleman from North Carolina to give a brief demographic sort of description of the People's Party.
Firstly, on the question of Medicare for all, I think that that gets to the attitude that we should take towards Bernie. I think that, we saw many times during the campaign, different groups lobby Bernie and throughout his career that we can't move Bernie. We have to move Bernie away from what would have been a really disastrous implementation version of Medicare for all that would have allowed corporate Democrats to sign on to what really was not Medicare for all. And so, on the question of Bernie and a third party, It's a similar process, I think, of moving along this path of convergence that is going to be the most powerful tool towards showing him that this is where the energy is, this is where the future is, and he should do as he has done for many years, and he should be an independent and fully embrace that and go back to those roots. And I want to say also quickly that on the role of electoral politics, to your question, versus the unsustainability of the economic paradigm, I completely agree with Peter, and that's why I invited Peter to join us here, actually, on the unsustainability, and even that the unsustainability of the economic paradigm actually predicates and creates the political system, results in the political system in which we have. However, there is the question still remains of, okay, how do we change that? Because we could have, as we do, there's already a super majority of Americans convinced that we need a new party, as Jackie pointed out. There's already a super majority of Americans convinced we need Medicare for all, we need free public college, we need to get money out of politics, we need to reduce inequality, so on. But yet those things remain. And so it's not enough to simply have public opinion, even wildly, overwhelmingly on your side about those things. We actually need to consider the fact that the institutions that hold power are the ones that are going to drive our lives regardless of public opinion, and we need to challenge those institutions. And we cannot simply allow electoral politics to remain in the realm, to seed that realm, because then those institutions which drive our lives in ways that we won't have a voice in, that we won't have control in, which will determine our lives, whether we recognize them or not, will still exist.
Yes.
Sorry. I wanted just to bring this topic up really fast because I'm afraid it's not going to be brought up, and it's really important. To your question, do our votes count? No. Probably not. Is primaries fair? No, they're not. Will political party make a difference? No. We don't know. But this is our country. The people give power, and we will take it away. So, what I'm asking you to do is remember that this is your country. These are your rights. We will take them back. Revolution starts at home. We cannot change the corrupt corporate system while enjoying commercialism, consumerism. If you want to really impact the elites and the corporate corruption, you divest your money from it. Yes.
Yeah.
The single most important thing you can do as an individual to prevent or stop climate change is to become a vegan and remove yourself from the corporate food chain. The best thing you can do is take your money out of these corporate banks, credit union, fight for a public bank. Revolution starts at home. Divest from the oligarchy, invest in your life.
I think I may be able to tie all three of the questions together. And so the first question seemed to me to be, when you're dealing with a corrupt system, a system that has proven time and time again you won't get a fair shake, why do you keep fighting? Would that be a fair?
Why do you continue to engage in interface?
So to answer your first question, and this is my honest to God belief, I don't think we've actually tried before. I believe that trying has always been started with telling people that we know what's best for them, not that we know them. And I think there's a powerful difference. And there's no way for me to prove this except for my life experiences and what I'm fighting for myself. But all I can say is that every time I've had a conversation with a progressive, a Democrat, a conservative, And I have started that conversation with who are you? Why do you believe these things? Do you want to grab a beer? Let's play some bowling. And like talked about politics in between, not just politics. I haven't won a supporter, but I've won a friend and somebody who may not vote the same way as me, but who wouldn't mind if my ideology became the most powerful thing in the nation. And so that's what I have to say to that. And to connect that to the young woman that was talking about the Green Party, this is my personal opinion about the Green Party. I'm ready for a third party, but I would only join your party under two conditions. The first is the name has to change. In my personal opinion, we have young people and we have conservatives and we need to get a majority. And the fact of the matter is the Green Party has a history of being this far left radical. Now, us in this room know that you're not. You're common sense and you're fighting for the right thing. But the objective of this conference is a majority. And I don't have time when we're trying to fight the status quo to walk around and say, no, like, they fight for everybody. Like, no, it's different now. All the deadwood's out. I wish I had the time, and I know that that's true, but we don't have the time and we gotta move fast. So my second thing about the Green Party is you mentioned the spoiler effect. And once again, I am with you. I know you're not spoilers. You should never face the criticism in a democracy that you're a spoiler because you fought and stood up for your values. But I will say this as a critique, that I do believe no matter what this third party is, I will not join a third party. I will not join a third party that fights up until 2020 for any statewide elected offices or any federal offices. I am so serious that we need to take control of state legislatures. Those are the social experiments of our country. If California can get single-payer health care, if we can put all of our energy into just that state legislature and prove that our values are the people, the majority's values, then that's how we get federal elected officers to pay attention. And finally, to your question, what is the demographic of the People's Party? And I'm pretty sure you already know the answer. The people. I am not saying, or the only person I'm not looking out for is the ultra-rich. And that's because they have pulled the biggest, I was actually thinking this the other day, and I think it's probably the truest thing to me, is that racism, as a black man in America, is the most ingenious way to divide the classes for centuries and centuries, to keep us bickering with each other instead of fixing the problem. Like, racism and all these different issues are very real, but what it does is it gives you something visceral to fight for, when economic security for all of us would give us the time, the space, the comfort to be like, oh, so you don't like black people? Well, that sucks, but I still have a house and a car, and I can drive my family to the park. We'll talk about this later. But when the white man is struggling to make ends meet, it's very easy for a corporation to say, yeah, you see those black people walking down the street, they're why you're poor. And even though that seems ridiculous, when you're struggling, you're stressed, and you're just like, what's going on? Like, I'm trying my hardest. Oh, maybe it is the black person. And it's simply that the People's Party is an economic party. If you want me to be extremely clear, and I don't like using this term, but just to get the point across, is that I am for identity politics. But I am for economic politics first. That's what I believe will give us a majority in our state legislatures. I feel that's the way we'll avoid alienating conservatives that will help give us that majority. And I don't think you have to sacrifice identity politics for economic policy. I think you can do both, but you gotta focus on the one that gives you the most votes.
Time, and there are some panelists that have flights to catch. So what I'd like to do is, we've heard about half the panelists kind of answer that question. I want to give Jackie and Peter and Jill a chance to respond to the same question, which is kind of a really good summary question. So Jackie, if you'd like to go first, then Peter, and then Dr. Stein, and then...
Yeah, thank you. Linda? I really wanted to thank you for bringing this issue up that you brought up here. I think it's very, very important to discuss. There's been discussion about it here so far, and I think it needs to continue. I think what I would perhaps add to your comments, or to respond to your comments, and I appreciate your responding to her offer, is that I think part of what's happening in the country today is that the American people are saying to the two major parties, you've become nothing other than self-perpetuating institutions. All you care about is holding on to your power. You don't care about the things that actually drove you to be founded in the first place. All you care about is holding on to the institution that you have created, and that's what the American people, I believe, are rising up against. So in the progressive movement, for the Greens to say, we will not be a self-perpetuating institution. We will put what we have created and our history and our capacities on the table for the movement to take and to shape is a very, very significant and meaningful thing to say. I wanted to express publicly my appreciation for your raising that issue and for your bringing that to the floor. I think that is very, very important. That, and perhaps maybe to build on some things, Charles, that you raised about the kinds of conversations that we need to be having as organizers. There's no more important tactical question, I think, than that. And I agree with a lot of what you've said about how to conduct those conversations. But I think the questions that we ask people are so important, and I think we need to rethink what some of those are. For example, the whole question of unification of independent forces. I think we have to take that out to the American people. For example, I think we have to ask the American people. We just did a whole thing with asking Bernie if he would form a little party, okay? That went how that went. I think we have to ask the American people, hey, would you like to see a new party created? Hey, how about the idea of the Green Party and the Libertarian Party, which are the country's two largest minor parties, coming together to form a single organization? What about that? Do you want to see that? Do you want to see people who come from different sides of the aisle come together to create something new, a tool that the American people could use? I think those are some of the things that we need to go and ask the American people what they think about that, and have that inform and enrich the discussions and the decisions that are being made in some of these rooms here today.
People are afraid. I said the people are afraid.
Afraid of what? New party or a truck?
I was a Bernie fan. Before this, I was, well, not active in politics at all because I figured it was crooked.
Yeah, this took
It was crooked, it was rigged, so I never got involved. I did this time because of Clinton, a woman. I thought, oh, how wonderful, a woman going to run for president. And then my son looked at me and said, Mom, he said, you really need to research who it is you want to put in the most powerful office in the country.
Good son.
Yes.
Good son.
So I did. And I became a Bernie fan. And then at the convention, my heart just went right in my stomach. And I could never figure out why Bernie did what he did. And I talked to a lot of people. I'm on Facebook. And I talked to a lot of people, and they're afraid. They're afraid of a third party. They're afraid a third party isn't going to succeed. Lately, I've had people come on my site and tell me I need to #DemEnter. And I'm like, what? You just didn't put that on my site. But that's what the problem is. The people are afraid that a third party isn't going to make it.
Okay, so I would like to talk about my experience of over 40 years in progressive movements and what has happened. I was a Democrat for about 40 years and then left for the Green Party. I went back to the Democratic Party, went back to the Green Party, and now I'm with a new party called Draft Bernie. What I know is that DemEnter truly believes they're going to change the Democratic Party. They truly believe that. Now, they may do it on a state level, but they will never get to the core of the problem, which is Dementor will not work.
Dementor.
Your Dementor will not work. I know that. I've been a progressive all my life. I've been a socialist all my life. Whenever the Democratic Party gets afraid, what they end up doing is giving crumbs to the progressives. And not only that, they'll tell you, you have nowhere to go. And that, to me, is a self-defeating mental attitude that they want to put in your mind. So the Democratic Party is out. We know as progressives, we cannot stay with them. They are cruel, they are corporate, they are evil. So I don't believe in evil, okay? Now as to the Green Party. I met Jill in Denver, Colorado. I just want to say, let me just say two things. The Green Party, as it stands, cannot stay the way it is. The Green Party has factors within the Green Party that are destroying it. Jill knows that. I have told Jill that. So we cannot take the name of the Green Party. We have to change it. We have to change it. I also believe we have to have a coalition because for years, progressive groups have worked against each other. It's ego, it's money, and it's not for everybody. They don't come together when the crisis is there. We have a crisis now. Are they working together? Absolutely not. So, we have to form a progressive party that does not have the label of the Greens because they have a bad name. No question about it.
We heard you.
Okay.
Excuse me.
That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. We have to work together.
I just want to say that
I love Jill. She knows I love her.
She wants to respond.
No, she has to go. She has to catch a flight. Thank you. So we're going to have to stop public, the comments in the audience for the moment. Peter, say one more thing, and then we'll have Jill make a closing statement.
Extremely fast, I'll just quickly plant some seeds. I think in light of what has just been said as well in terms of these gravitations towards parties and the identification with them, the two major things I think inhibit social progress is a lack of creativity, first, because people are so indoctrinated into the mindsets and the structures and the philosophies that are handed down to them and the repetition, the operating conditioning that they engage every day. And the second is the divide and conquer that's fundamental power-preserving tactic and also self-generating problem between the lower classes. And if those two things can kind of be understood, where we expand our creativity, we realize we have to stop fighting amongst ourselves. I recommend, of course, Where We Go From Here by Martin Luther King, the last book he wrote. Absolute brilliant treatise on the way this society needs to progress economically. And I also recommend a second book written in 1934 in the heat of the Second World War called Business as a System of Power, which details 6 fascist nations and what's built into their fascism and their political control. And you'll find that deep down underneath the kernels of business and this, I hate to say it, sound cliche, capitalistic mindset, there's an inevitable gravitation that pushes against any type of general public interest and always gravitates and ebbs and flows towards the interests of fascism, as we're seeing today.
Yep.
Sure. I think all these, it would be great to have a whole weekend for us to address this question of what's the role of parties and what are the relative merits and drawbacks of the different parties. And I feel like all we can do is begin to just scrape the surface. The most important thing to happen in this conference for us to resolve to all work together, which I think is what we I do want to just answer some of the questions that have come up just to get that conversation going. And let me say that all of the concerns raised about the Green Party have been raised about every other progressive party, going back to the time of slavery, when the abolitionist parties were also called spoilers and were also dragged through the mud for daring to stand up and resist and oppose the political predators. This is a sign of success. When they are fear campaigning you and smear campaigning you is a good sign. Changing the name, I will advise you, doesn't help. You can look at what happened to the single-payer movement that spent a long time thinking, oh, if we just change the name from single-payer to Medicare for all, surely everyone will fall in line. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen. They will smear and denigrate your new name as well. And when they start to do it, it means that you have arrived, and it means stay the course and keep fighting because you're actually getting somewhere. I want to remind you that when the Green Party was founded, there were several other progressive independent parties that were founded. For example, the Labor Party, which was started with far more institutional support, the support of the labor movement, and a lot of money. Where is it today? Wiped off of the political map. Same is true for all of the progressive parties that have preceded us and which were at one time national forces. They have all been beaten back. The Green Party, some people say, oh, you're not effective, you're not strong. Actually, we are the only survivor of this onslaught of the political power against the The goal of the Green Party is not to take over the progressive movement. The goal of the Green Party is actually multi-partisan democracy. Yeah. That is how we go forward. And this weekend, with a sense of, well, maybe we can create a kind of steering committee where every non-corporate political entity, and I think that is a very important firewall so that the Democrats and the other predators are not sneaking in. I'm all for working with grassroots libertarians who share most of the agenda with us, but it's the corporate libertarians that I have a problem with. I think just ensuring that we all represent a politics of integrity, that we are not being bought, for us to share that basic safeguard of not taking private corporate money, not being bought out. That's how we decide who comes to the table. We all come to the table. We keep working together. For example, to work on a single-payer Medicare for all, to be able to coordinate phone call campaigns and email campaigns and showing up. Same thing for this war in Korea, which they are just begging to have. There are so many emergencies that we can have an emergency response network for. It's begging to happen. And at the same time, for us to decide which of these candidates. We've got campaigns that we can win. These are local, they are mayoral campaigns, they're school committee campaigns. Our agendas have converged. Our structures haven't. But we can just seize the moment, bite the bullet, and stand up right now while we still can, while there's still a planet that we can save. There's so much that we can do, and we can start winning elections right now, getting behind some of these amazing candidates. Seth Caperdale in New Jersey, for example, people will support these candidates. Remember, a near majority of voters did not show up because they don't buy into corporate politics. And I'll close with Alice Walker's comments that the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. On the student debt alone, we've got the power. 44 million young people locked into predatory student loan debt with no relief in sight. They will come out, for free public higher education. Instead of spending $1 trillion on a new generation of nuclear weapons, we should be spending $1 trillion on a new generation of young people, getting them out of student debt. We bail out Wall Street, trying to bail out the victims of that Wall Street waste, fraud, and abuse. We have the power. We just need the structure. Let's defer all these questions about branding, not branding, which brand do we use. We will have all the time in the world if we have a world left to stand on in which we can have this debate.
Once a revolutionary wind comes, it takes fire. So I personally want to thank the Green Party and Jill Stein for their work in carrying the torch to us. have to start with thanking and honoring those who come to you and the work that they've already done. The draft burning people have not slept. The single mom spent his last dollar. Right? All of you have sacrificed. You are honored. We are honored to have you here. So the most important part when you go back to your communities is to remember to honor those that have worked before you and long before you.
Yeah.
You know, this is my hero. Being a woman in politics is hard. We fight for our right to fight for you in our own progressive circles. So I just want to say thank you to the Green Party who held that torch, to Nick and his brilliant strategy to pull people out of the Democratic Party. People are crying all weekend, you know? So this is important. We're coming together. So thank you for all you bring to the table. We honor you.
Thanks to everyone for participating. Thank you so much to the panel. I think these are conversations we should continue to have for the rest of the day. Feel free to follow them out into the lobby and harass them if you can catch them.